The wind carried the scent of dying leaves and ancient magic across the ridge of whispering ruins, where starlight met the glow of distant magma flows. Julian pressed his palm against the stone fragment, feeling its warmth pulse through his fingers like a heartbeat. The artifact was older than memory, carved with symbols that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. His breathing quickened as power surged through his body, light dancing beneath his skin like trapped lightning. Something was wrong. Or perhaps something was exactly as it should be. Julian of the Lotus Scribes had spent his life among dusty tomes and forgotten scrolls, archiving the magical knowledge that others deemed too dangerous or too obsolete to preserve. At 27, he was considered young for such responsibility, but his gift for understanding ancient languages had earned him respect even among the elder scribes. He preferred the company of books to people, finding solace in the measured cadence of written words rather than the chaotic emotions of living beings. But now, as autumn's first chill touched the mountain peaks, Julian felt something stirring within him that had nothing to do with scholarly pursuits. The artifact's power flowed through his veins, and with it came a certainty that terrified him. His hand moved instinctively to his stomach, where a warmth that wasn't entirely magical had taken root. He was pregnant. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Omegas could conceive, of course, but always within the bonds of a recognized union, always with the blessing of their clan, always with the proper rituals and ceremonies. Julian had none of these things. He was unbonded, unmarked, and according to the ancient laws, what was happening to him should have been impossible. The legend whispered through his mind, words he had translated from a crumbling manuscript years ago. The Omega who conceives without a name shall bear the air of change, or of ruin. Julian's breath misted in the cold air as he carefully wrapped the artifact in silk cloth. He had come to the ridge seeking answers about a series of magical disturbances that had been plaguing the northern territories, but instead he had found something that would change everything. The fragment was clearly a piece of something larger, something that had been deliberately broken and scattered. The power it contained was unlike anything he had encountered before, wild and untamed, resistant to categorization. As he prepared to leave, Julian's enhanced senses picked up the sound of approaching footsteps. He tensed, recognizing the confident stride and the subtle scent of pine and leather that meant only one person. His heart clenched with a mixture of longing and fear as a familiar figure emerged from the shadows between the ancient stones. Malric of the Forest Pack stood silhouetted against the dying light, his powerful frame wrapped in the dark green cloak that marked him as a ranger of the wilderness clans. His auburn hair caught the last rays of sunlight, and his amber eyes held the same intensity that had haunted Julian's dreams for months. The alpha werewolf was everything Julian was not: confident, direct, unafraid of his own strength. Where Julian preferred the safety of libraries and archives, Malric thrived in the dangerous spaces between civilization and the wild. Julian. Malric's voice was carefully neutral, but Julian could hear the undercurrent of something deeper. I didn't expect to find you here. The disturbances, Julian replied, his voice steadier than he felt. The council asked me to investigate the source of the magical anomalies. Malric nodded, his gaze sweeping over Julian's form with the practiced assessment of a warrior. Find anything useful? Julian's hand tightened on the wrapped artifact. Perhaps. The patterns suggest something old has been disturbed, something that was meant to remain hidden. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken history. 6 months ago, Julian had been part of a research expedition to the Twisted Desert, investigating reports of shapeshifter attacks. Malric had been assigned as their guide and protector, and for 3 weeks they had traveled together through landscapes that seemed to exist outside of normal reality. It was there, under stars that burned with unnatural colors, that Julian had discovered what it meant to desire someone with every fiber of his being. The night they had shared had been unlike anything Julian had ever experienced. Malric's touch had awakened something primal in him, something that transcended the careful boundaries he had built around his heart. For hours they had moved together with desperate intensity, as if they could somehow merge their souls along with their bodies. Julian had felt truly alive for the first time in his life, connected to something greater than himself. And then, with the dawn, Malric had simply vanished. No explanation, no goodbye, just the cold realization that Julian had been nothing more than a temporary diversion. The Alpha had left him to make his own way back to civilization, carrying nothing but memories and a wound that still hadn't healed. "How long are you staying?" Malric asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "I leave at first light," Julian replied. "I have what I came for." Malric took a step closer, and Julian caught a whiff of his scent, that intoxicating combination of forest and leather and something uniquely him. "Julian, about what happened in the desert." "Don't." Julian's voice was sharper than he intended. "Whatever you're going to say, I don't want to hear it." Malric's expression tightened. "You don't even know what I was going to say." "I know enough." Julian adjusted his pack, preparing to leave. "I know that alphas take what they want and move on. I know that I was foolish to think it meant anything more." "You're wrong." Malric's voice carried an edge of desperation. "It meant everything. That's why. That's why you disappeared without a word." Julian couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. "That's why you've avoided me for 6 months?" Malric's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "That's why I can't stop thinking about you. That's why I've been patrolling this area for weeks, hoping to catch your scent on the wind. That's why I'm terrified of what I might do if I let myself get close to you again." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither quite dared to cross. Julian felt his resolve wavering, felt the familiar pull of attraction and something deeper. But before he could respond, a new voice cut through the evening air. "How touching. The wolf finally admits his feelings." Both men turned to see a figure approaching from the opposite direction. Julian's breath caught as he recognized the speaker. Caius Scarwright moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his pale skin seeming to glow in the twilight. The demon healer was tall and lean, with sharp features and eyes the color of fresh blood. His dark hair was pulled back in a severe style that emphasized the angular planes of his face, and his clothing was practical but expensive, marked with the subtle sigils of his profession. Julian's relationship with Caius was complicated in ways that made his connection to Malric seem simple by comparison. They had met 8 months ago, when Julian had been poisoned by exposure to a particularly virulent form of psychic magic. The standard healing methods had been useless against the toxin, which fed on positive emotions and conventional magical energy. Only Caius, with his unique ability to heal through pain and shadow, had been able to save him. The treatment had been unlike anything Julian had ever experienced. Caius had drawn the poison from his system by channeling it through his own body, using his demonic nature to neutralize what would have been fatal to a normal healer. The process had required an intimate connection between them, a sharing of pain and darkness that had left Julian feeling raw and exposed. For weeks afterward, he had been unable to shake the memory of Caius's hands on his skin, the way the demon's eyes had burned with an intensity that seemed to see straight through to his soul. But where Malric had offered passion and fire, Caius had offered something more complex. Their connection was built on understanding rather than desire, on the recognition of two damaged souls who had found solace in each other's company. Julian had never been sure if what he felt for Caius was love or gratitude, but he couldn't deny the comfort he found in the demon's presence. "Caius." Julian's voice was carefully neutral. "What brings you to the ridge?" The demon's smile was sharp and knowing. "The same thing that brings you here, I suspect. The artifacts are calling to those who can hear them, and the barriers between realms are growing thin." His red eyes fixed on Julian with uncomfortable intensity. "Though I wonder if you found what you were looking for." Julian's hand moved instinctively to his stomach, and he saw both Malric and Caius notice the gesture. The Alpha's nostrils flared as he scented the air, and Julian realized with growing panic that his condition might not be as secret as he had hoped. Werewolves had enhanced senses, and demons were notoriously perceptive. If either of them suspected what was happening to him, "I found answers," Julian said carefully, "though perhaps not the ones I expected." Caius took a step closer, and Julian caught the scent of herbs and something darker, something that reminded him of storm clouds and ancient altars. "Answers have a way of raising new questions," the demon said softly. especially when they concern matters that were never meant to be simple. Malric growled low in his throat, the sound carrying a warning that made Julian's pulse quicken. Speak plainly, demon. What are you really doing here? I might ask you the same question, Wolf. Caius's voice was silk over steel. Though I suspect we both know the answer. We're here because Julian called to us, whether he meant to or not. Julian felt heat rise in his cheeks. I didn't call anyone. I came here alone. Did you? Caius's smile was gentle but implacable. Then why do I feel the pull of your distress like a physical weight? Why has every protective ward I've set been pointing me toward this place for the past 3 days? Malric's eyes narrowed. You've been watching him. I've been watching over him, Caius corrected. There's a difference. Not much of one. Malric's canines had elongated slightly, a sign of his growing agitation. Julian doesn't need your protection. Doesn't he? Caius's gaze shifted to Julian, and the Omega felt exposed under that knowing stare. Tell me, Julian, do you feel safe right now? Do you feel like you can handle whatever's coming on your own? Julian wanted to say yes, wanted to project the same confidence he relied on in his scholarly work. But the truth was that he felt more vulnerable than he had in his entire life. The pregnancy was just the beginning. The artifact in his pack pulsed with power that felt increasingly unstable, and his dreams had been filled with visions of darkness and change that he couldn't quite interpret. I can take care of myself, he said finally, though the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Of course you can. Caius's tone was soothing, but his eyes remained sharp. But that doesn't mean you should have to. Malric stepped closer, and Julian found himself caught between the two men, their combined presence overwhelming in the fading light. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that some burdens are too heavy to carry alone, Caius replied. I'm suggesting that Julian might benefit from having people who care about him nearby. People? Malric's voice was dangerous. Or you specifically? Both of us, Caius said calmly. Whether we like it or not, we're connected to him. All 3 of us are bound up in whatever's coming. Julian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. What do you mean, bound up? Caius pulled a small crystal from his pocket, its surface dark and reflective. I've been tracking the magical disturbances as well. The patterns are clear to anyone who knows how to read them. Something is coming that will change everything, and you're at the center of it. That's impossible, Julian protested. I'm just a scribe. I catalog old stories and forgotten spells. You're an Omega who can read the deepest mysteries, Caius corrected. You're someone who can bridge the gap between knowledge and understanding. And now, he paused, his eyes moving to Julian's midsection. Now you're carrying something that was never meant to exist. The words hit Julian like a physical blow. He took a step backward, his hand moving protectively to his stomach. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Caius's voice was gentle but implacable. I can smell the change in you, Julian. Your scent has deepened, become more complex. There's a new resonance to your magical signature. And that artifact you're carrying is responding to something inside you, something that wasn't there before. Malric's eyes went wide as understanding dawned. Julian? Are you? I don't know, Julian whispered, the words torn from him against his will. I don't know anything anymore. The admission hung in the air between them like a fragile thing. Julian felt tears prick at his eyes, overwhelming emotions that he had been holding back for weeks finally breaking free. The careful control he had maintained, the scholarly detachment that had always been his shield, crumbled in the face of his terror and confusion. Malric was beside him in an instant, strong hands gripping his shoulders. Hey, it's okay. We'll figure this out. How? Julian's voice cracked. How do we figure out something that shouldn't be possible?
I'm unbounded, Malric.
I don't have a mate. I don't have a clan's blessing. I don't have any of the things that are supposed to make this work. You have us, Caius said quietly. He had moved closer without Julian noticing, and now the Omega found himself surrounded by the 2 men, their combined presence both overwhelming and strangely comforting. Whatever's happening, Whatever's coming, you don't have to face it alone. Julian looked between them, seeing the sincerity in their eyes, the genuine concern that transcended whatever complicated feelings existed between the three of them. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe that it might be possible, that two people who had hurt him in different ways might somehow become his salvation. But then reality crashed back in, and he pulled away from both of them. I need to go back to the city. I need to consult the archives, find out what the legends say about this. Julian. Malric's voice was soft. Whatever you find in those books, whatever the consequences are, I want you to know that what happened between us in the desert wasn't meaningless. It was the most real thing I've ever experienced. Caius nodded slowly. And what happened between us when I healed you, that connection is still there. It will always be there. Julian felt his heart clench with a mixture of hope and despair. Then why does it feel like I'm losing everything? Because you're afraid, Caius said simply. And fear makes everything seem darker than it is. But darkness isn't the opposite of light, Julian. It's just another way of seeing. As night fell over the ridge of whispering ruins, Julian made his way back toward the city, leaving behind the two men who had somehow become central to his existence. The artifact in his pack pulsed with increasing intensity, responding to the new life growing within him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that his carefully ordered world was about to be turned upside down. The journey back to the Guild of Letters took 2 days, during which Julian found himself plagued by dreams that felt more like prophecies. He saw visions of a child born under stars that burned with unnatural fire, of ancient powers awakening after centuries of slumber, of a world where the boundaries between different realms grew thin and permeable. In every vision, he saw himself standing at the center of great changes, holding a child whose very existence would reshape the world. The Guild of Letters was housed in a massive stone building that had been ancient when the city was young. Its walls were lined with countless books, scrolls, and manuscripts, the accumulated knowledge of centuries preserved in climate-controlled chambers. Julian's quarters were on the 3rd floor, a modest apartment that served as both living space and private study. The moment he stepped through the door, he felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. This was his sanctuary, his place of safety and solitude. He carefully placed the wrapped artifact on his workbench, then moved to the window that overlooked the city. The lights below twinkled like earthbound stars, and Julian found himself wondering where Malric and Caius were, whether they had followed him back to the city or returned to their own territories. The thought of them out there somewhere, thinking about him, made his chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. Over the next few days, Julian threw himself into research with desperate intensity. He consulted every text he could find that dealt with omega pregnancy, supernatural conception, and the ancient prophecies that spoke of children born outside the normal order. What he found only deepened his anxiety. The legends were consistent in their description of such children as harbingers of great change, beings who would either usher in a new age of prosperity or bring about the end of everything. The most detailed account came from a manuscript that was so old its pages crumbled at his touch. According to the text, an omega who conceived without a bonded mate would bear a child touched by the powers of creation itself. Such a child would be born with abilities that transcended normal magical categories, capable of bridging the gaps between different realms and species. They would be marked with symbols that belonged to no single clan or tradition, identifying them as something entirely new. Julian's hand moved to his stomach as he read, feeling the subtle changes that were becoming more pronounced with each passing day. His body was adapting to accommodate the growing life within him, but more than that, his magical abilities were shifting and expanding. He could sense things that had been hidden from him before, feel the pulse of ancient powers that lay dormant beneath the city's foundations. It was during one of these late-night research sessions that Julian heard a soft knock at his door. He looked up from his books, surprised by the interruption. Few people had access to the guild's residential floors, and fewer still would visit him at such an hour. When he opened the door, he found Caius standing in the hallway, carrying a small leather satchel. The demon looked as composed as always, but Julian could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his red eyes seemed to burn with suppressed emotion. "I brought you something," Caius said without preamble. May I come in? Julian stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. The demon moved through the apartment with the fluid grace Julian remembered, his gaze taking in the scattered books and research materials. He set his satchel on the table and opened it, revealing several small bottles filled with dark liquid. Ink, Caius explained, made from ingredients that exist in the spaces between realms. It can write truths that normal ink cannot capture, reveal secrets that are hidden even from the writer. Julian picked up one of the bottles, feeling the weight of it in his hands. The liquid inside seemed to move with a life of its own, swirling in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Why are you giving this to me? Because I think you need to write your own story, Caius replied. Not the one that the legends prescribe, not the one that others expect, but the one that comes from your own heart. Julian set the bottle down carefully. And you think this ink will help me do that? I think this ink will help you understand what you truly want, Caius said. Sometimes the heart knows things that the mind hasn't figured out yet. Julian looked at the demon, seeing something in his expression that he couldn't quite identify. Caius, why are you really here? You could have sent this with a messenger. Caius was quiet for a long moment, his red eyes fixed on Julian's face. Because I needed to see you, because I've been having dreams about you, about the child you're carrying, about the changes that are coming. Because I wanted to tell you that whatever happens, you're not alone in this. Julian felt tears prick at his eyes.
I'm scared, Caius.
I don't know what's happening to me, and I don't know what it means for the future. Fear is natural, Caius said gently, but it doesn't have to control you. You're stronger than Julian. You've survived things that would have broken other people. Have I? Julian's voice was barely a whisper. Sometimes I feel like I'm barely holding myself together. Caius moved closer, and Julian caught the scent of herbs and storm clouds that always surrounded him. Your silence is a ritual, the demon said softly. Your solitude is a form of strength. But sometimes, even the strongest people need someone to witness their struggles. Julian looked into Caius's eyes and saw something there that made his heart race. Not the desperate passion he had shared with Malric, but something deeper and more complex. Understanding, acceptance, a willingness to stand beside him whatever came. Will you stay? Julian asked, the words coming out before he could stop them. Just for tonight. I don't want to be alone. Caius nodded slowly. I'll stay as long as you need me to. They spent the night talking, sharing stories and fears that neither had ever voiced before. Caius told him about the burden he carried as a healer who worked with pain and shadow, about the lives he had saved and the ones he had lost. Julian spoke about his childhood among the Lotus scribes, about the loneliness that had driven him to seek solace in books and ancient wisdom. As the hours passed, Julian felt something shift between them, a deepening of the connection that had begun during his healing. When dawn came, Caius helped Julian prepare breakfast, moving around the small kitchen with an ease that suggested he had always belonged there. Julian found himself watching the demon's hands as he worked, remembering the way they had felt against his skin during the healing process. There was something hypnotic about Caius's movements, a precision that spoke of centuries of practice and patience. Julian, Caius said as they sat down to eat, I want you to know that whatever decision you make about the child, about the future, I'll support you. No questions, no judgment. Julian felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the tea he was drinking. Thank you. That means more than you know. I also want you to know that I don't expect anything from you, Caius continued. I'm not here because I think you owe me something, or because I want to claim some kind of relationship. I'm here because I care about you, and I want to help if I can. Julian reached across the table and took Caius's hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against his palm. I care about you too, more than I probably should. Caius's eyes darkened. There's no should in this, Julian. There's only what is. Before Julian could respond, another knock came at the door. This time it was louder, more insistent, and Julian recognized the pattern immediately. His heart began to race as he realized who was waiting in the hallway. Malric, he whispered. Caius squeezed his hand gently. Answer it. You can't avoid him forever. Julian opened the door to find Malric standing in the hallway, his hair disheveled and his clothes travel-stained. The alpha werewolf looked like he had been running for days, and his amber eyes were wild with something that might have been desperation. Julian, Malric said, his voice rough with exhaustion. I need to talk to you. Julian stepped aside, letting him enter. Malric's gaze immediately fixed on Caius, and Julian saw his jaw tighten with barely controlled emotion. I see you didn't waste any time, Malric said, his tone carefully neutral. It's not what you think, Julian said quickly. Caius was just what? Malric interrupted. Just happening to be here when you needed comfort? Just happening to be the one taking care of you while I was away. Caius stood slowly, his movements fluid and controlled. I was here because Julian needed a friend, he said calmly. Something you might understand if you hadn't spent the last 6 months running away from your feelings. Malric's eyes flashed with anger. You don't know anything about my feelings, demon. I know enough, Caius replied. I know that you care about Julian enough to track him across half the continent, but not enough to stay when things get complicated. Stop. Julian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Both of you just stop. I can't deal with this right now. Both men turned to look at him, and Julian saw the concern in their eyes, the way they both wanted to reach out to him but held themselves back. The weight of their combined attention was overwhelming, and Julian felt tears begin to fall despite his best efforts to maintain control. I'm pregnant, he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I'm carrying a child that shouldn't exist, and I don't know who the father is, and I don't know what it means for the future. I'm scared and confused, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. The silence that followed was deafening. Julian saw Malric's face go pale, saw Caius's expression tighten with something that might have been pain. He waited for them to react, to demand answers or make accusations, but neither of them spoke. Finally, Malric stepped forward, his movements slow and careful. Julian, could it be mine? I don't know, Julian whispered. The timing is right, but the circumstances, nothing about this makes sense. Caius moved to Julian's other side, his presence steady and grounding. It doesn't matter whose child it is biologically, he said quietly. What matters is that Julian needs support, not interrogation. Malric's eyes flashed with anger. Of course it matters. If it's my child, then what? Caius interrupted. You'll claim some kind of ownership? You'll demand rights you haven't earned. I'll take responsibility, Malric said fiercely. I'll do whatever it takes to protect them both. Protection isn't something you can impose on someone, Caius replied. It's something you offer and hope they'll accept. Julian looked between them, seeing the tension that crackled in the air, the way they both wanted to claim him but neither quite dared. I need time, he said finally. I need to figure out what's happening to me before I can think about anything else. Of course, Caius said immediately. Take all the time you need. Malric nodded reluctantly. Whatever you need, Julian. I'll be here. Over the following weeks, Julian found himself caught in a strange dance between the two men. Malric visited regularly, bringing gifts for the baby and stories from his travels. He was attentive and caring, but Julian could sense the alpha struggle to contain his more possessive instincts. Caius, meanwhile, was a constant presence, appearing at Julian's door with healing herbs and practical advice, never demanding attention but always available when needed. Julian's pregnancy progressed rapidly, his body changing in ways that both amazed and terrified him. The child moved within him with increasing frequency, and sometimes Julian could swear he felt bursts of magical energy that seemed to come from the growing life. His own abilities continued to evolve, and he found himself able to sense things that had been hidden from him before. The artifact he had found on the ridge pulsed in harmony with his heartbeat, and Julian began to suspect that its awakening was connected to his condition. One evening, as Julian sat in his study working on a translation of an ancient text, he felt a familiar presence approaching. The wards around the guild were strong, but they parted easily for someone Julian's heart recognized. A moment later, Caius appeared in the doorway, his face grave with concern. "Julian," he said without preamble. "We need to talk." Julian set down his pen and looked up at the demon. "What's wrong?" "I've been monitoring the magical disturbances," Caius explained. "They're accelerating. Whatever's coming, it's coming soon." Julian felt a chill run down his spine. "How soon?" "Days, maybe weeks," Caius replied. "The barriers between realms are weakening, and there are entities that are taking notice." "What kind of entities?" Julian asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "The kind that see change as an opportunity," Caius said grimly. "The kind that would use your child for their own purposes." Julian's hand moved protectively to his stomach. "They can't have him." "Him?" Caius's eyebrows rose. "You know the child's gender?" Julian nodded. "I've been having dreams, visions. I see him clearly now, and I know he's going to be born soon." "Then we need to make preparations," Caius said. "You can't stay here, Julian. The guild is too exposed, too easy to find. You need somewhere safe to give birth, somewhere protected." "Where?" Julian asked. "Everywhere I go. I'm putting people in danger." "Not everywhere," Caius said quietly. "I know a place, an ancient sanctuary that was built specifically to protect those who carry the future. It's warded against detection, and it has everything you'll need." Julian looked at the demon, seeing the sincerity in his red eyes. "You would do that? Risk yourself to protect me?" "I would do anything to protect you," Caius replied without hesitation. "And I think Malric feels the same way." As if summoned by their conversation, Malric appeared in the doorway, his face tense with urgency. "Julian, we need to leave. Now." "What's happened?" Julian asked, rising from his chair. "The forest pack has been asking questions," Malric explained. "They've heard rumors about an Omega carrying an impossible child, and they're planning to investigate. If they find you here, they'll take him," Caius finished. "Use him as leverage or worse." Julian felt panic rise in his chest. "I can't run. I'm too far along, and the child, he's not ready." "He'll have to be," Malric said grimly, "because staying here isn't an option." What followed was a frantic hour of preparation. Julian packed his most essential belongings while Caius and Malric worked together to create a concealment spell that would hide their departure. Julian was amazed by how well the two men worked together when their focus was on protecting him, their earlier animosity forgotten in the face of immediate danger. They left the guild under cover of darkness, slipping through the city's ancient sewers to avoid detection. Julian's condition made travel difficult, but both men were patient and supportive, taking turns helping him when the going got rough. They moved through the night like shadows, guided by Caius's knowledge of the hidden ways and Malric's wilderness skills. The sanctuary Caius had mentioned was located deep in the old forest, in a grove that existed partially outside normal space. The trees there were ancient beyond measure, their trunks twisted into shapes that seemed to defy natural law. At the center of the grove stood a stone circle, its monoliths carved with symbols that predated written language. "This place is older than the current age," Caius explained as they approached the circle. "It was built by the first peoples, those who understood that some things are sacred beyond all else." Julian felt the power of the place wash over him, a deep thrumming that seemed to resonate with the life growing within him. The child stirred in response, and Julian gasped as he felt a surge of magical energy that made his knees weak. "It's starting," he whispered. Malric was beside him in an instant, strong arms catching him as he stumbled. "What's starting?" "The birth," Julian said, his voice tight with pain. "The child is coming." What followed was unlike anything Julian had ever experienced. The labor was intense but strangely transcendent, as if the very fabric of reality was bending to accommodate the new life that was about to enter the world. Both Malric and Caius stayed with him throughout, offering comfort and support in whatever way they could. Julian lost track of time as the contractions intensified. The world narrowed to the circle of ancient stones, the feeling of strong hands holding him, the the voices of two men who had become the most important people in his life. When the final moment came, Julian felt as if he were being torn apart and remade simultaneously. The child was born as the sun rose over the forest, his first cry echoing through the grove like a song of pure power. Julian cradled his son against his chest, marveling at the perfection of tiny fingers and toes, the way the baby's eyes seemed to hold depths that belonged to someone far older. "He's beautiful," Malric whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "He's perfect," Caius added, his usual composure cracking to reveal something raw and vulnerable. Julian looked down at his son and saw what the legends had promised. The child bore a mark on his chest, a symbol that belonged to no single clan or tradition, but seemed to incorporate elements from all of them. It was a sign of his unique nature, proof that he was something entirely new in the world. "What will you name him?" Malric asked softly. Julian considered the question, thinking of all the ancient names he had encountered in his research, all the prophecies and legends that had led to this moment. "Aaron," he said finally. "It means born of change." Both men nodded their approval, and Julian felt a sense of rightness settle over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever forces might try to claim or control his son, he knew that he had chosen the right name. Aaron was indeed born of change, and he would change the world in return. The days that followed were peaceful in a way that Julian had never experienced. The three of them settled into a routine within the sanctuary, sharing the responsibilities of caring for the newborn. Malric proved to be surprisingly gentle with the baby, his warrior's hands tender as he helped with feeding and changing. Caius used his healing abilities to ensure that both Julian and Aaron recovered properly from the birth, his touch bringing comfort and strength. Julian found himself watching the two men with growing wonder. They had put aside their rivalry and territorial instincts, working together with a harmony that seemed natural and right. When Aaron cried, either of them would respond immediately. When Julian needed rest, they took turns watching over him. They moved around each other with an ease that spoke of deep trust and mutual respect. One evening, as Julian sat nursing Aaron while Malric and Caius prepared dinner, he realized that something fundamental had shifted between them. The tension and uncertainty that had characterized their earlier interactions had been replaced by something deeper and more stable. They were no longer two men competing for his attention. They were three people who had become a family. "Julian," Malric said, interrupting his thoughts, "there's something I need to tell you." Julian looked up from his son's peaceful face. "What is it?" Malric exchanged a glance with Caius, and Julian saw some kind of silent communication pass between them. "We've been talking," Malric continued, "about the future, about what comes next. And," Julian prompted, "and we've realized that we don't want to go back to the way things were," Caius said quietly. "We don't want to pretend that this didn't happen, or that we can just return to our separate lives." Julian felt his heart begin to race. "What are you saying?" "We're saying that we want to stay," Malric said. "All of us together. We want to be a family." "But that's impossible," Julian protested. Relationships don't work that way, don't they?" Caius moved closer, his red eyes intense. "Who made the rules about how love is supposed to work? Who decided that a person can only care for one other person at a time?" Julian looked between them, seeing the sincerity in their faces, the hope that they were trying to contain. "You're talking about something that's never been done before, like carrying a child without a bonded mate?" Malric pointed out. "Like giving birth to someone who will reshape the world? You've already broken every rule that matters, Julian. What's one more?" Julian felt tears prick at his eyes. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm brave enough." "You're the bravest person I know," Caius said softly. "You've faced impossible odds and come out stronger. You've created life where none should exist. You've built a family from nothing but hope and determination. And you don't have to do anything alone," Malric added. "We're here. We're not going anywhere." Julian looked down at Aaron, who was watching him with eyes that seemed far too wise for someone so young. "What kind of world am I raising you in?" he whispered to his son. "A world where love is possible," Caius replied. A world where families can be chosen rather than imposed. A world where change is something to be celebrated rather than feared. Julian felt something shift inside him, a loosening of the fear and uncertainty that had been his constant companions. You really want this? Both of you? More than anything, Malric said. With all my heart, Caius added. Julian nodded slowly, feeling a smile begin to spread across his face. Then let's try. Let's see what we can build together. The kiss that followed was soft and sweet, a promise of new beginnings and shared futures. Julian felt the love of both men wrap around him like a warm blanket, and for the first time in months, he felt truly safe. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever forces might try to tear them apart, they would face them together. Aaron made a soft sound in his arms, and Julian looked down to see his son watching them with apparent approval. I think he likes the idea, Julian said, laughing through his tears. He's a smart kid, Malric said, reaching over to stroke the baby's cheek. He knows a good thing when he sees it. As the weeks passed, their unconventional family settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. They took turns with night feedings and diaper changes, shared meals and quiet conversations, found ways to accommodate each other's needs and preferences. Julian discovered that having two partners meant having twice the support and twice the love, but also twice the complexity and twice the opportunity for growth. Malric remained the passionate one, quick to anger but equally quick to forgive, always ready with a joke or a story to lighten the mood. Caius was the steady one, thoughtful and careful, the one who remembered details and planned for contingencies. Julian found himself in the middle, the heart of their small family, the one who helped them understand each other and find common ground. The outside world seemed far away in their forest sanctuary, but Julian knew that they couldn't hide forever. Aaron was growing rapidly, his magical abilities manifesting in ways that confirmed all the prophecies about his unique nature. He could calm storms with his laughter, make flowers bloom with his touch, and sometimes Julian caught glimpses of other realms reflected in his son's eyes. He's going to be powerful, Julian said one evening as they watched Aaron sleep. More powerful than any of us. Power without wisdom is dangerous, Caius observed. We'll need to teach him how to use his abilities responsibly. We'll need to teach him about love, Malric added. About family. About choosing connection over domination. Julian nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. We'll need to teach him about the world he's going to inherit, help him understand his role in shaping it. We will, Caius said firmly. All of us together. As autumn deepened into winter, Julian found himself thinking about the future more and more. Aaron was growing so quickly that Julian could barely keep up, and soon it would be time to introduce him to the wider world. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. One morning, Julian woke to find Aaron sitting up in his crib, his small hands glowing with soft light. The baby was focused on something Julian couldn't see, his expression serious and intent. As Julian watched, the light from Aaron's hands began to form shapes in the air, symbols that Julian recognized from his years of study. He's writing, Julian breathed. He's writing in the old language. Malric and Caius appeared beside him, both men staring at the display with wonder. The symbols hung in the air for a moment longer, then faded away, leaving only the memory of their beauty. What did they say? Malric asked. Julian smiled, feeling tears of joy prick at his eyes. They said, family. He knows who we are, what we mean to each other. Of course he does, Caius said softly. He's been surrounded by love since the moment he was born. That's his foundation, his strength. As winter gave way to spring, Julian made a decision that would change everything. It was time to leave the sanctuary, time to take Aaron out into the world and show him the life that awaited him. It was time to stop hiding and start living. Are you sure about this? Malric asked as they prepared to leave. It's dangerous out there. There are people who would use Aaron, who would try to control him. There are also people who would love him, Julian replied. People who would protect him, who would help him grow into the person he's meant to be. And besides, Caius added, We can't protect him by hiding him away. He needs to understand the world he's going to help shape. They left the sanctuary on a bright spring morning, carrying nothing but their love for each other and their determination to build something beautiful together. Julian carried Aaron in a sling across his chest, feeling the baby's contentment as they walked through the forest. Both Malric and Caius stayed close, their eyes constantly scanning for threats, but Julian felt no fear. They were together, and together they could face anything. The journey back to civilization took several days, during which they encountered no one who meant them harm. Word of their unusual family had spread, but rather than hostility, they found curiosity and acceptance. Other outcasts and misfits approached them, drawn by the promise of a new way of living, a new way of loving. By the time they reached the city, they had acquired a small following of believers, people who wanted to be part of the change that Aaron represented. Julian realized that they weren't just returning to their old lives. They were creating something entirely new. They settled in a house on the outskirts of the city, close enough to be part of the community but far enough away to maintain their privacy. Julian returned to his work with the guild, but now his research focused on the prophecies and legends surrounding Aaron's birth. Malric took on the role of protector and guide, teaching combat skills to those who wanted to learn. Caius established a healing practice that drew clients from across the realm, his unique abilities in high demand. But their most important work was raising Aaron, helping him understand his place in the world and his responsibility to use his power wisely. The child grew with remarkable speed, his abilities manifesting in new ways almost daily. He could communicate with animals, heal injuries with a touch, and see through illusions that fooled even experienced mages. More importantly, he was learning about love and family from three people who had chosen each other against all odds. He saw the way Julian and Malric would argue about practical matters but never about their fundamental commitment to each other. He watched as Caius would quietly solve problems that the other two hadn't even noticed. He experienced the security of being cherished by multiple people, each of whom brought something unique to his upbringing. As Aaron's first birthday approached, Julian found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. A year ago, he had been a lonely scholar, convinced that he was destined for a life of solitude. Now he was part of a family that defied every convention, raising a child who would reshape the world. "Any regrets?" Malric asked one evening as they sat together on their porch, watching Aaron play in the garden. Julian considered the question, thinking of all the challenges they had faced, all the ways their lives had become more complicated. "None," he said finally. "Not a single one." "Even though it's harder this way?" Caius asked. "Even though we're constantly having to navigate between three different sets of needs and desires?" "Especially because of that," Julian replied. "Easy love isn't really love at all. It's just convenience. What we have is real because we chose it, because we keep choosing it every day." As if he had heard them, Aaron looked up from his play and smiled, his whole face lighting up with joy. In that moment, Julian saw the future that awaited them. A future where love was stronger than fear, where families could be chosen rather than imposed, where differences were celebrated rather than feared. They had begun as outcasts and misfits, but they had become something beautiful and powerful. They had proven that love could conquer any obstacle, that hope could survive any trial, that change was not something to be feared but something to be embraced. Julian looked at his son, at the two men who had become his partners in every sense of the word, and felt a deep satisfaction settle in his chest. They had created something unprecedented, something that would inspire others to believe in the possibility of love that transcended boundaries. The future stretched out before them, full of challenges and opportunities, but Julian no longer felt afraid. He had everything he needed: the love of good men, the joy of raising a remarkable child, and the knowledge that they were part of something greater than themselves. As the sun set over their garden, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Julian made a silent promise to himself and to his family. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They would continue to choose love over fear, hope over despair, connection over isolation. They had rewritten the rules of what was possible, and in doing so, they had created a legacy that would last for generations. Aaron would grow up knowing that he was loved unconditionally, that his family was built on choice rather than obligation, that the world could be changed by those brave enough to love without limits. And somewhere in the future, when Aaron was asked about his unusual upbringing, he would smile and say the words that Julian had come to believe with all his heart. Love is what makes a family. Everything else is just details. Their story was far from over, but Julian knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them as they always had together, with love as their strength and hope as their guide. They had found their way to each other against impossible odds, and they would never let go of what they had built. The autumn sign had promised change, and change had come. But it had come in the form of love, not destruction. It had come in the form of a family that chose each other, not one that was forced together by circumstance. It had come in the form of a child who would grow up knowing that the world was full of possibilities, that love could conquer any obstacle, that families could be built on hope and determination rather than blood and tradition. As Julian carried Aaron inside for the night, with Malric and Caius by his side, he felt the deep contentment that came from knowing that he was exactly where he belonged. They had created something beautiful together, something that would endure long after they were gone. And in the quiet moments before sleep, as Julian listened to the soft breathing of his family around him, he knew that the greatest magic of all was the simple miracle of being loved and loving in return. Everything else was just details.